I've never been desperate in my life. I grew up poor, but my dad always taught me how to work for what I got. But one day, when my husband lost his job and my kid got sick, I couldn't take it anymore. I went down on my knees before my boss and begged him to pay me. "Please, boss, I haven't been getting paid for months now. I don't have anywhere else to turn to. Please, my son, he needs to go to the hospital, and we're behind on our bills." "Grace, please. This is a place of business, not a daytime drama. I'm trying to make money here. Keep your problems at home." "But you owe me 3 months of my salary. I've got a sick kid, Tom. My husband's jobless, and we need to be able to afford to eat." "Sounds like a you problem. Now get back to work, or it's not just your salary that you'll be losing." I wanted to quit. I wanted to kick him in the gut, to be honest. But what could I do? I needed the job. And all I could hope was that he'd finally pay me. One day I had the idea to get his business audited. If he wasn't going to pay me, I was going to have my revenge. I spoke to a guy who worked at our local IRS office. I told him about all Tom's wrongdoings and how much tax he's dodging, and how he doesn't pay a lot of his employees. I knew that diner in and out, and so I had all the information I needed. The guy said he would visit first thing in the morning, and so the next day, I walked into the diner feeling vindicated. Until the boss called me into his office. And who do I find sitting there with him, having coffee and playing cards? None other than the same guy at the IRS that I talked to. I could feel myself go white in the face. My boss didn't say anything about my attempt. He just asked me to bring them more coffee. "Oh, and by the way, you can't get me audited, Grace. I have friends in high places. What you did, I consider that treason. Try that again, and you'll be wiping vomit in the parking lot instead of waiting tables." "Treason," he said, as if he were some king. I heard them laughing when I closed the door. From that moment on, I walked around at work with a resignation letter in my pocket. I was just waiting for the day, the moment, when I could date it and sign it. The moment he paid me what he owed, I was gone. But then, one day, I spilled coffee on one of our regular customers. I was tired, and I had been sleeping less than 4 hours every day. I had refinanced my house just to get my boy the treatment he needed, and my husband was depressed because he hadn't been able to get a new job. I'm so very sorry, Mr. Higgins, Oh, no, don't be. I heard what happened to your boy. Honestly, it's okay. If you could just get me a napkin." "I will. Thank you, Mr. Higgins. I'll be right back. What in the name of all things holy is going on here? Have you spilt good coffee on our dear Mr. Higgins?" Tom started berating me. He shouted at me at the top of his lungs. It was so loud that even the bakery 2 doors down could hear. I had to close my eyes because the tears were starting to run down my face. I was so embarrassed. The diner was full, and there were people there that I went to school with. I could just feel Gemma in the back, smiling, rejoicing at the fact that I was being shouted at. She always resented that she didn't become a famous actress like she told everyone when we were in high school, and she dumped all that frustration on me. She loved seeing her husband boss me around every day. "Please, don't shout at the poor girl. It was an honest mistake." "Don't tell me how to run my own joint, old man." I was just, "Shut your trap. And as for you..." He was about to go on another tirade, and I'd had enough. At that moment, I didn't care about the money anymore. I could starve for all I cared. I was not tolerating it anymore. I took out the piece of paper signed it, dated it, and handed it to him. I quit. I was gonna fire you. Well, I quit first, and you better mail me that check you owe me, or it's the cops I'm going to next. Mr. Higgins stood up as well. He told my boss that if he treated his employees like that he wasn't going to be a patron of the diner any longer. I broke down the moment we got to the parking lot, and Mr. Higgins comforted me. He listened to me as I began to realize that now I had bills, my son's medication to buy, and no way to pay for them. Why don't you come work for me? I looked up in surprise. Mr. Higgins owned the motel at the edge of town, and nobody knew. We all thought he was just some pensioner who liked our coffee. Turns out, he owned and operated the most successful business in our small town. That very next day, I started working for him. He was 85 and no longer wanted to manage such a big property, so I learned everything I could from him. And in a couple months, I was doing everything there while he got to finally relax and stay home. Gemma and the other waitresses laughed at me for working at the motel. They laughed because I was getting paid less, and in their eyes, I settled for a less noble job. They called me a glorified maid, and sure, I was fixing beds and cleaning rooms, but at least Mr. Higgins paid me on time. Eventually, Mr. Higgins made me the supervisor. He even hired my husband, and suddenly, I was the boss. I had to deal with one employee who was a bit of a problem. Her name was Mary. She was lazy, irresponsible, and a huge gossip. She would cause fights amongst the other employees because of the rumors she would spread, and she would somehow avoid doing her job by pushing her tasks on other people. I realized very quickly that the place would bring in more money if Mary wasn't causing trouble. So, I got an idea. I befriended Mary. I told her everything about Tom and Gemma's diner and how to get a job there. I told her exactly how Tom likes his coffee and how to anticipate Gemma's needs. She was the perfect company virus. At the moment Tom began hiring for my replacement, I told Mary to apply. It was guaranteed to pay more than her job as a cleaner at the motel, after all. Plus, she'd get tips. What she didn't know is how bad Tom was at paying his staff. So Mary celebrated when she got the job. And I celebrated my triumph. I hit 2 birds with 1 stone. I got rid of a troublesome employee, and now I got to watch as Mary wreaked havoc on Tom's diner. It was sweet, sweet revenge, seeing them struggle with her. She spread gossip, making the waitresses fight. She stole from the cash register, and they never figured out where the money went. Mary was so lazy and rude to the customers that they stopped coming back. And the icing on top was that Gemma caught Tom taking her out on a date. Gemma and Tom got a divorce, and their business began to spiral out of control, and it was all thanks to Mary. Tom's troubles didn't stop there, 'cause when Gemma left him and he got stuck with Mary, she started spending his money on lavish clothes and designer bags, things he couldn't afford. Meanwhile, Mr. Higgins retired, and he left me the business. He loved how I ran his business so much that we got into an agreement. I would keep working for him for 2 more years until I could buy the company from him. He no longer paid me, but I got to keep all the profit. He only asked that I send him a few thousand every month. That was when my life turned around. My husband and I sold our house, and we lived in the motel. Without a mortgage, we had way more money than we ever had before. Our son helped us too, and we were able to send him to a good school. Mr. Higgins came to visit one day, only a year after he left me the motel. He said he was going to Italy, and that the motel was mine. I tried to protest, saying that I still had to pay him for another year. But he declined, saying that I deserved it. I cried and hugged him. We drove him to the airport and told him that he would always be welcome back. A month later, Tom's business folded. His new wife was spending so much that he had to resort to declaring bankruptcy. And not only that, but some people at the IRS also found out about his friend's corruption and Tom's connection to him. Now, he was not only penniless, but also being investigated. The waitresses came running to me, begging for work. I smiled with satisfaction and told them the jobs I had for them were beneath them. After all, they would only be maids. They basically begged me for it. And now they work for me, folding linen and cleaning rooms, the same job they laughed at me for. Tom got put in jail with his friend for tax fraud. And my motel grew and grew until I could afford to put up another one, right where the diner used to be. Mr. Higgins still emails every now and again, telling me about his travels and about the Belgian widow he met while vacationing in Naples. They got married, and he's buying my family tickets to come visit them in the summer. People say success is the best revenge. Not in my experience. Sometimes, revenge, when coupled with a bit of success, is the best revenge.